often say to a mom who's harried and hassled and tired and worried about her child, Mom, give them eggs and bacon for breakfast, put butter on everything. I promise you'll see a difference. And they do. Just those two things.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions Podcast, sponsored by the Weston A Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
I'm your host, Hilda Labrada Gore. This is episode 65, and our guest is Fallon Morell. Sally is the head of the Weston A. Price Foundation, and she has been a pivotal mover and shaker for the real food and slow food movements. She was promoting fermented foods and kombucha and all these things long before they started catching on. In today's show, she proves once again that she's ahead of the curve as we talk about the importance of nourishing fats in the diet. She just released her book on the topic entitled Nourishing Fats, and it will be the focus of our conversation. Before we begin, we want to thank our sponsors, listeners like you. Truly, we could not be on the air if it weren't for your support, so thank you. And our members. The Weston A. Price Foundation is a member-supported organization. They depend on members to cover their costs for education, research, and activism. Would you like to become a member? It couldn't be easier. As they prepare to launch their membership drive, all you need to do is go over to the westonaprice.org website, click on Become a Member, and then give. You will enjoy their quarterly journal and other perks that come along with membership, in addition to enjoying the peace of mind that comes with being a part of an organization with a critical healing mission. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Sally.
Thank you, Hilda. It's great to be back, as always.
Well, I'm excited today to talk about your new book. Tell us about it.
Okay, well, this book is a real dream come true for me. It's called Nourishing Fats, Why We Need Animal Fats for Health and Happiness. And I really like the part about happiness because one of the important chapters in the book is how animal fats help us feel good chemicals and use them in our body. But anyway, it's coming out January 31st. Mary Enig and I wrote down the kind of an outline for this book years ago. I said, Mary, we need to do a book just on saturated fats, animal fats. And of course, we never got to it. But finally, I was able to put all this together. And with a great debt to her, it's dedicated to her memory, actually.
Beautiful. Well, there's so many aspects I want to cover about this, but the minute I heard you say animal fats, I realized, wow, this is going to shock a lot of people because vegetarian and veganism is in right now. It's very trendy.
It's not just vegetarian and veganism. It's everything. No matter what kind of diet that you read about in the papers or that you hear about, whether it's vegetarianism, veganism, the DASH diet, all of these diets, the one thing they all have in common is the demonization of animal fats. So they might say no fats at all, or they might say, oh, eat the healthy fats like olive oil and vegetable oils. But really, the healthy fats are the animal fats.
And how is that? Tell us a little bit about the science behind saturated fats.
Okay, so most animal fats are saturated, which means that they are hard at room temperature. And the attack on animal fats as saturated fats began back in the 1920s when the vegetable oils came on the market, and they wanted to demonize their competition. So they demonized the competition in two ways. First of all, they said animal fats have cholesterol and animal fats are saturated. They're hard fats, and you want these beautiful liquid oils, okay? Well, there's one really key fact that we have to keep in mind, and that is that our bodies are not at room temperature. Our bodies are 98 degrees. That's a pretty warm day. Okay? Our bodies are tropical. They're hotter than tropical. Tropical is 80 degrees, okay? So these fats are not hard in our bodies. They are fluid and soft. And anyone who has taken organic chemistry knows that the cell membrane, the surrounding of each cell, has about 50% saturated fat in it.
50%, wow.
50%. It's called a lipid bilayer. It's made up of trillions of fat molecules, and at least half of those fat molecules have to be saturated or your cells will not work. They actually become leaky. They're too fluid. They don't have stability. Now, because of this, because our bodies need saturated fats so fundamentally, they have a backup plan. And so if you're not eating saturated fats, your body makes saturated fats out of carbohydrates. And if you're not eating saturated fats, you're going to crave carbohydrates because you'll need those carbs to make the saturated fats. Your body cannot function without saturated fats. So the worst diets are actually not the high-carb diets, but they are the diets that are low in carbs and low in saturated fat. Mm-hmm. A good example is a diet that was very popular, but it's faded into oblivion. That's the South Beach diet. And that was plenty of meat, vegetable oils, no carbs. And it's truly a dangerous diet. And only if you had no knowledge of basic human biochemistry could you write a book like that.
So it's dangerous when we go low fat or if we have the wrong kind of fats in our diet.
Yes, if we're either no saturated fats or no carb, then the body won't have the saturated fats that it needs.
And what about our brains? I understand they need fat.
Well, the brain is the most fatty organ in the body. The brain's about 50% saturated. But a very important fat in the brain is called arachidonic acid. It's 11% in the brain. There's no organ that has more arachidonic acid in it. And arachidonic acid is a fat that we can make a little bit, but we can't make enough for good health. And the one source in our diet is animal fats. You do not get arachidonic acid from any other food but animal fats.
So if someone's using avocado oil or coconut oil, they still are not getting that arachidonic acid.
That's right. Now there's nothing wrong with coconut oil or avocado oil. Those are safe oils to use, but they shouldn't be the only oils you're using. You really do need the animal fats to get sufficient arachidonic acid. Now, the person who's written the most and done the most work on arachidonic acid is Chris Masterjohn. He wrote a wonderful article in our journal, and he points out that arachidonic acid is needed to, he calls it tight cell-to-cell junctures. So you've got all these cells in your body. You don't want them floating apart. You want them kind of next to each other, and that's what the arachidonic acid does. It's like a little pin that holds all the cells together. And if you don't have enough arachidonic acid, you'll have a lot of skin problems. You'll have very dry skin because the water leaks out. Your brains won't work properly. And arachidonic acid is very important for digestion to make sure that all the cells lining your gut are nice and tight together. Otherwise, you have a leaky gut. So the arachidonic acid is really essential. And what are we seeing today in people? We're seeing digestive problems, skin problems, neurological problems.
Absolutely.
And a lot of this has to do with not getting enough arachidonic acid, which is uniquely in the animal fats.
Yeah, I see so many people with skin problems, memory problems, the very things you're discussing, and digestive issues, of course.
Yes, right.
And a key could be the animal fats.
Yes, absolutely. And of course we see this in our children. I mean, the eczema that these children suffer from, and that's a horrible thing for a child. It's really uncomfortable for them. It's kind of like constant torture,
Yeah, I've heard of it. It's a very red rash, right? And it can cover a lot of their bodies.
That's right. So I think if you look at the basic biochemistry, and I do have one chapter in my book, if people find it too complicated, they can skip that chapter, but where I actually do go into the biochemistry, I show the diagrams of the molecules and try to explain just why. Leave the politics and the science apart. The studies, just look at these molecules and you can see why they're so important. The saturated fat is the most stable of the fat molecules. It doesn't break down. It doesn't cause free radicals. It's a very safe fat to use.
Well, it's funny that you say that because for years people have vilified these animal fats and said they're unsafe, they're dangerous, they're bad for our health. Why would they say that?
Well, this is the propaganda of the vegetable oil industry, and a lot of studies were misinterpreted or designed to give results that suggested that. But what I do is go through all these studies and, all these different diseases that are blamed on saturated fat and just show that the science does not support that accusation. We start with heart disease, of course, And even now it's coming out how they cheated on these studies that implicated saturated fat and heart disease.
Well, and even if you knew nothing about it and you just thought for a minute about how the U.S., as you've said, the population started to go low fat when they were advised to, and yet the incidence of heart disease did not go down.
It did not go down. And what went up was cancer. And that's absolutely to be expected. And we have known for 60 years that the substitutes for animal fats, the vegetable oils, are extremely carcinogenic because they are unstable and they break down with the result of a lot of free radicals. And we know that this is a big initiator of cancer.
Well, I'm so glad you're getting this word out. I just left a group of young moms, and they're concerned for the health of their children.
Yes.
So what would you recommend in terms of feeding our kids these animal fats?
Let us reason together. So what is the fat that's used in all of nature to nourish all mammals? All mammalian milk contains butterfat.
Ah.
That is the fat for growth, for nourishment. So human babies need that fat also. So the moms, when they're breastfeeding, need to be nourishing themselves really well so they have lots of fat in their milk. And then when they wean their babies, they need to put this same fat in the food. It's butter. Okay?
Uh-huh.
You know, the really shocking thing, Hilda, is that formula has no saturated fat in it. They only put vegetable oils in it. When you buy milk replacer for animals, the third ingredient is animal fat. Because they know the animals won't grow and be healthy if they don't put animal fat in the formula for the animals. But they're not putting it in the formula for the human babies.
That's so sad.
And there's no cholesterol in the formula for the babies either. Now, that's the key thing. The biggest concentration of cholesterol will be in the animal fats, and so that's another reason they've told you not to eat the animal fats. Well, a baby, cannot make cholesterol. They need to get this from the diet, and that's why mother's milk is very rich in cholesterol and contains special enzymes to ensure the baby absorbs all that cholesterol. That baby needs that cholesterol to form the brain, the nervous system, the gut, the skin, everything. And babies need really high cholesterol foods when they're growing. And they're not getting this from formula. And they won't even get it from mother's milk if the mother's not eating properly.
So what should a mom do if she can't nurse and wants to give her baby's formula? What should she do?
Well, we have a formula. It's actually called the Fallon formula, but it's in my other book, the Nourishing Traditions Book of Baby and Child Care, and it's also on the Weston A website. And it is based on whole raw milk, and we actually add some cream to it. So we have more saturated fat, more cholesterol in there. And then as she starts to wean her baby, she wants to feed the baby foods that are extremely high in cholesterol and things like choline and all the fat-soluble vitamins. And so that would be egg yolks and liver. Egg yolks are the highest cholesterol food there is, and it's the ideal food for a growing baby. So that's baby's first food, egg yolks.
So you are talking about cholesterol like it's a good thing.
And cholesterol is a good thing. It's an essential thing for growing children, and it's not a harmful thing for adults. And the public doesn't realize this, but even the biggest promoters of the cholesterol theory of heart disease admit that the cholesterol you eat in your diet has nothing to do with whether or not you get heart disease. But they still demonize the saturated fats.
In other words, you can eat foods with cholesterol all you want, and it's not going to affect the cholesterol in your blood.
Right, but the problem is with that, the only food that's really rich in cholesterol that doesn't have a lot of fat is shellfish.
Uh-huh.
So they're saying you can eat oysters and shrimp and stuff, but not butter and egg yolks and liver.
Wow. And then you're missing a lot of good stuff.
Right, right.
Well, speaking of missing, what happens to children who don't have this animal fat in their diet or this cholesterol?
We have a number of studies that paint a very ominous picture. An early one was published by a pediatrician who noticed that when children's parents went on the diet for heart disease and cut out cholesterol and saturated fat, that the children stopped growing, that the children had neurological problems, that they had a lot of health problems. Then we have these studies, some people in Holland who were looking at children on macrobiotic diets. Mm-hmm. So these were diets very high in grain, no animal fats, no animal foods. And what they found was the children were much shorter, had a lot more infections, and they had delayed neurological development. They weren't as smart as the kids that were getting the animal foods. And if they could convince the families to at least add butter, dairy fats, and some fish, then the children start to grow normally again. So these are some pretty serious things that happen to these children when they don't get these animal fats.
Tell me more, Sally.
Okay, so today we have a situation where this dietary advice is given to everybody, not just people with heart disease, not just macrobiotic children, but it's basically across the board. The diets recommended for the pregnant moms is virtually no animal fat. It's really quite shocking to read.
Really? Even today,
to read what's in these books for pregnant moms. And then the diets recommended for the children, the weaning diets. They have things like tofu and applesauce and fruit and vegetables, but again, no butter, no liver, no egg yolks. And is it any wonder that we're seeing this epidemic of problems in our children? And what are the two main problems we're seeing? We're seeing, one, digestive problems, and two, neurological problems such as behavior problems or learning disabilities. And we can directly correlate that with this abysmal diet that the children are on. And the moms would give them the right diet if the advice they were getting is good. But
Absolutely.
It's not good. It's horrendous, yes.
Oh, every mom wants to do right by her child.
Absolutely. And I think we have a lot of moms who are frantic. The doctors aren't helping. All they can do is prescribe something like Ritalin, which is basically cocaine for children. And they're doing everything but giving those children what they need, which is the animal fats. I often say to a mom who's harried and hassled and tired and worried about her child, Mom, give them eggs and bacon for breakfast, put butter on everything. I promise you'll see a difference. And they do. Just those two things.
Wow, that's great. And it's so delicious, too. Stay tuned for more on animal fats, how fat deprivation in our children's diets affects their health, and how critical fats are for our brain development. And now we want to stop and thank our sponsors, listeners like you. Sarah Chana had this to say on Libsyn. As a nurse trained with the conventional theories, it is very refreshing to hear an alternative. Thank you, Sarah. We appreciate your feedback. Hey, everybody, feel free to give us feedback like this on any channel where you catch our show. It could be on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play Music, TuneIn, or our website. Hey, and we also want to thank our members. Membership costs only pennies a day and allows the Weston A. Price Foundation to keep making a difference with education, research, and activism related to our wellness in food, farming, and the healing arts. If you are loving this show, please join the team by becoming a member. It couldn't be easier. Go to the westonaprice.org website, click on Become a Member, and that's about it. You'll get our quarterly journal with transcripts of some of our shows and other important articles and information. And you'll get other perks as well. So thanks so much. Is there anything else we need to know about fats? What vitamins do they have to offer us?
Well, this is the other thing about the animal fats. They contain vitamins that we really can't get anywhere else in the diet. And I start that chapter off by quoting all the mainstream websites where they say that saturated fats are empty fats, that there's nothing that we can get from saturated fats. Nothing could be further from the truth, because the key vitamins, fat-soluble vitamins A, D, and K, the vitamins that Dr. Price found were so high in traditional diets, that's where we get them. We get them from these animal fats and then animal foods like liver and egg yolks, which are high in fat. And I have quite a long discussion in there about vitamin D, because the premise is we can't get vitamin D from food. And it turns out that it's actually very hard to test to find the vitamin D in food. And I just show how different the results have been from different laboratories. For example, in the food databases, they say there's no vitamin D in lard, or just a tiny little bit. And then I did one study where I had one lab test lard, and we found 11,000 units of vitamin D in a tablespoon of lard. So there's a big variation depending on the lab you use.
And maybe the quality of the lard that you have.
And the quality, and is it grass-fed or, industrial. And this was something that Mary Enig told me years ago. She said, Sally, they are lying about how much vitamin D is in the lard. She said, I had a friend at USDA who showed me some test results, and they found a lot of vitamin D in lard, but they never got published. And I said, well, let's contact him. But he died, and so we could never find any of this. But it was something that she alerted me about years ago. When you cook in lard or bacon fat, or when you eat pork, you're getting vitamin D, and often quite a bit of vitamin D.
And our general population in the U.S. is vitamin D deficient.
We're very D deficient for sure, especially our babies.
So it's good to know that these fats have a great effect on us, and they carry these amazing vitamins that we really need.
Vitamin K is another one, which we need for strong bones. We need it for neurological function and to protect us against heart disease. And that's in animal fat. Wow. And then also vitamin A, which is just fundamental to everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's why it's A.
Yes, right. That's the first one they discovered. Yeah.
Tell me about how they benefit our neurological function.
I think this is the most interesting chapter in the book, Animal Fats in the Mind. And one of the most fascinating things that we have discovered in the last 10 or 20 years is that our bodies make exactly the same chemicals that we find in the plant world out there. We make cannabinoids, just like what's in marijuana. We make opiates, and we even make an endogenous cocaine. So those are the three main drugs out there. And our bodies make these substances in just the right amounts. We have receptors for them. When they're made in the body, they are taken care of. You don't have the side effects and whatever.
So our bodies make these chemicals?
Yes, we make them, and we have receptors for them. That's why the drugs work, because we have receptors for them. We wouldn't have receptors for them if we didn't make them ourselves. It kind of makes sense, really. And so the marijuana, the cannabinoids, are made directly out of arachidonic acid, which is this fat that we get uniquely from animal fats. It's just a lot of it in butter. So I always say, if you're feeling depressed, if you don't feel good, eat butter, eat lots of animal fats. And the people who are not eating those animal fats, they feel lousy. They feel terrible. And when they get onto the drugs, and a lot of them have written about this, they said, when we take these drugs, we feel normal. It may just be for a short period of time, but they feel like they're supposed to feel. I like to say the natural state of the body is to be high all the time. And that's what we get from the animal fats. Now, the other two, the endogenous cocaine and the opioids, again, they are made from various substances that are all linked in with the animal fats, either with the vitamins that are in the animal fats or the cholesterol. We need cholesterol for the receptors to work. So, again, the animal fats are very much involved in all of these feel-good chemicals that we make.
And so people that are not getting them are, like you said, they don't feel well, and some of them are depressed.
They're very depressed, or they are manic. They have too much dopamine, and so they're, they can't focus on things, or they can't get going. They have too little dopamine, or they're not making the endorphins, which is the endogenous cocaine. So, they're just not making these things, and the animal fats will give them what they need to make them in their bodies.
Well, going back to what we were saying earlier, I'm concerned that the public isn't going to receive this well because animal fats are blamed for all the diseases out there these days.
They are, and this is very interesting. So it started off with they were blamed for heart disease.
Yes. We
were told that we're eating this rich, indulgent diet. We had too much cholesterol and saturated fat, and so we would be much healthier and purer and better if we used the vegetable oils, the pure vegetable oils instead. That's how it started. But if you go to any of the websites for any of the major diseases now, whether it's diabetes, cancer, kidney disease, Alzheimer's, they all say avoid saturated fats. So they've all kind of jumped on this bandwagon with really no proof of any type. Just to give you one example, the Kidney Foundation, on their website, they say avoid saturated fats, they're hard on the kidneys. Well, I found a study which they gave saturated fats to people on dialysis and had kidney disease, and all of them recovered just by getting saturated fats. Now, don't you think that would be something that it would be important to tell kidney patients? But no, they're not hearing this. Another thing about the kidney, one of the ways that the kidney works is a process called myristoylation. It's very complicated. I'm not sure I understand it myself. But myristoylation involves the joining of a protein with a saturated fat called myristic acid. And myristic acid is a 14-carbon saturated fat. The best source in our diet is butter. It's a unique source of myristic acid, actually, in the Western diet. And so the kidneys just cannot work without myristic acid. And again, we get that from animal fats. So that's just the kidneys. Now, as far as cancer is concerned, it's really hard to see how they can justify condemning saturated fats and telling people to eat vegetable oils, because we know the vegetable oils are carcinogenic, and we know that the saturated fats protect you against cancer. I mean, that's in the scientific literature, but they do it anyway.
Is it because the word has been out for so long to avoid that they're kind of just going with the flow of that?
Well, I think that's a kind of charitable explanation. But I think what happens is the vegetable oil industry gets on their board. Representatives with ties to that industry get on their boards and make sure that the message favorable to that industry goes out. Now, that's exactly what they did with the heart disease. We actually have a paper trail on that and how they did that. I don't have the same paper trail for the other foundations and diseases, but I think that's what happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's why this podcast and the information that the foundation puts out is so important, because people are not finding these things in other places.
That's right. And this book, I'm sure, is going to shock a lot of people. And Hilda, I've written it in a way that's understandable. It's not technical, except for the one chapter which people can skip over if they don't want to get technical. But I think it's important to have an understanding of what these fats are, what they look like, because otherwise people are so easily deceived. They use the argument that if you eat saturated fats, it's going to clog up your arteries like fat clogs up a drain.
Yes.
It's so silly. And first of all, because our arteries are very warm.
Yes, as you
degrees,
said, exactly.
But also the artery clogs are not from fat sticking to the arteries. The artery clogs start in the intima, which is the tissue lining the arteries. And there's a lot of calcium in the artery clogs. Not that much cholesterol in the artery clogs.
Oh, my goodness.
And so why aren't they condemning the calcium? Well, because the dairy industry is so strong in this country that they wouldn't let them. See? So it's all political, who gets blamed.
Crazy.
Yes.
I think that's why your original book said challenging the diet dictocrats, because there are people out there who have interests that are not for our health, but for their own gain.
And, that book came out in 1996. Here we are 20 years later, Hilda, and the same fraudulent message is going out to people. Nothing has really changed. If anything, it's become more strident, more insistent. It's being applied to everybody in the country, including growing children. In 1991, they changed the guidelines for the pediatricians to tell, at the 2-year-old interview for the pediatrician, that's when the pediatrician says no more animal fats for your baby. Low-fat milk, no butter, a low-fat diet for your baby now. And I often ask when I'm giving a talk, how many mothers or fathers have gotten this lecture from their pediatrician when their baby was 2 years old? And there's always 4 or 5 hands that go up.
Oh, my goodness.
This is genocidal advice that we're giving to our moms. And if the doctors told them, your baby still needs these fats, your baby's brain is growing right through till they're an adult, your bones are growing, hormone formation, gut formation, skin, they need saturated fats for all these things. Absolutely. Then the moms would give them to them.
Yeah,
they would. Yeah.
So as we start to close up, can you tell me what other topics does your book address?
Well, we first of all go into the history, which is really sordid and involves some pretty interesting characters. So that's the first chapter, and the second chapter is the technical chapter.
Yes.
And then the third chapter, I go through all the diseases. Why are saturated fats being blamed for all these diseases? I have quite a discussion about weight loss, for example. And then we have the one on children. We have a chapter on saturated fats in the mind. I also have a chapter on the substitutes, the vegetable oils and the trans fats, and just how really bad for us they are. To me, that is the most harmful and dangerous thing in the food supply. I know we have the refined sugars and we have the additives and all that stuff, but what's hurting us the most are the substitute fats, the industrial fats and oils.
Right.
And my last chapter is on butter. of course. And just, I go through all the beneficial compounds that are in butter that are not in the substitutes. And, it's just crazy that we have abandoned this natural fat. How could something that nature uses to nourish all infants be bad for us? It's just not possible.
It's common sense.
Yes, it's common sense. Yes.
Wow. Well, I usually end our interviews with this one question.
Okay.
And so you may relate it to fat since that's what we're talking about. If the listener could only do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
Well, first of all, switch to butter. Use butter for everything. Then I would say use the animal fats in cooking. So we cook in lard, bacon fat, tallow, duck fat, goose fat, butter. Those are the best fats for cooking. And then the third thing I would say is make your own salad dressing. And now that you'll use olive oil for your salad dressing, but you just want to get away from all of these industrial fats and oils. I mean, all three of those steps get you off the industrial fats and oils. And they're not hard. They really don't cost more. And you'll feel better almost immediately, I promise.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, thank you for your time today, Sally.
Thank you, Hilda. Thanks for having me.
My guest today was none other than Sally Fallon Morell. To find out more about the Weston A. Price Foundation that she heads and her book, go to westonaprice.org, click on the word podcast, and go to the show notes for episode 65. Oh, and a big shout out to Podcast Village. You all are the wind beneath the show's wings. Thank you for your support, encouragement, and editing skills. We appreciate you.
Thanks for listening today. Our website, westonaprice.org, offers free resources to address your questions and support your journey to health. You'll find videos, articles, and brochures covering a broad variety of health topics. Wise Traditions is brought to you by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. The content of this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for medical advice.